A forward operating base under siege, mortars raining down, communications severed, command staff being eliminated one by an enemy sniper, the entire base on the verge of collapse. Then something impossible happened. Shots began landing from an abandoned guard tower, precise, lethal, turning the tide of the entire battle. When officers finally traced the source, they found someone who shouldn't have been there, someone they had escorted to a bunker for safety just minutes earlier, a woman with a visitor badge and a rifle that changed everything. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If stories like this move you, consider subscribing. What they discovered about her identity would rewrite everything they thought they knew about that afternoon. The road to forward operating base. Sentinel cuts through terrain that doesn't forgive mistakes. Rocky slopes rise on either side, dusted with snow that never quite melts even as January gives way to something that might become spring. The base itself sits in a natural depression, ringed by ridgelines that offer both protection and vulnerability, depending on who controls the high ground. On this particular afternoon, the place hums with the controlled chaos of imminent deployment. Mechanics work on convoy vehicles with the focused intensity of people who know lives depend on their attention to detail. Supply trucks get loaded with precision. Soldiers run through drills they could perform in their sleep, but practice anyway because muscle memory saves lives when thinking takes too long. A civilian sedan approaches the main gate just after noon. The vehicle is unremarkable, dust-covered from the long drive. Nothing about it suggests it carries anything more significant than another family member stealing a few precious hours before deployment separates loved ones again. The security checkpoint processes these visits dozens of times each week. The guard on duty barely glances up as the driver's window descends. Iris Cullen presents her visitor authorization form with hands that show a wedding ring, but no other distinguishing features. She is somewhere in her mid-30s, with the kind of tired eyes that suggest the drive was long and sleep was insufficient. Her jacket is worn but clean. Everything about her appearance suggests someone trying to hold herself together through a difficult goodbye. The guard scans the paperwork with the efficiency of routine. Captain Reese Cullen's name appears in the system along with his unit designation. 2nd Battalion, deploying tomorrow morning. The authorization is valid until 1800 hours. Everything checks out the way it always does. The guard waves her through without a second thought because she is exactly what she appears to be. Just another military spouse making the pilgrimage to say goodbye. Background noise and the larger machinery of deployment. Invisible in the way that support networks always become invisible to those they support. Iris parks near the visitor center and retrieves a canvas duffel from her trunk. The bag looks heavy enough to contain a change of clothes, maybe a few personal items. Nothing unusual, nothing worth noticing. Inside the administration building, Corporal Dane Lockett processes her temporary badge with the bored precision of someone who has performed this exact task hundreds of times. He recites the restrictions without looking at her face. Designated areas only: commissary, chapel, family center. Her husband can meet her in the recreation building once his unit breaks from exercises. She nods and accepts the badge without complaint or question. Lockett prints it and slides it across the counter, already looking past her to the next item on his checklist. The badge gets clipped to her jacket collar. She becomes officially authorized and officially unremarkable in the same moment. The base reveals itself in layers as Iris walks through it. Soldiers move past her, without acknowledgement, because she exists in a category that requires no interaction. She is furniture, a reminder of the world beyond the wire, but not part of the mission itself. She finds a bench near the motor pool and settles there with her duffel beside her, hands folded in her lap, like someone waiting patiently for time to pass. Her eyes move across the organized chaos. A supply convoy being staged near the eastern perimeter. Mechanics installing additional armor, plating on a Humvee. A communications tower undergoing routine testing. Technicians climbing its framework with practiced confidence. To anyone who might glance her way, she appears anxious, scanning the compound for a familiar face, wringing her hands slightly. The body language of worry and anticipation. But the camera holds on her face longer than casual observation would warrant. There is something in the quality of her attention that doesn't quite match the performance. Her gaze doesn't search, it measures, tracks, calculates distances and angles with a precision that has nothing to do with reunion anxiety. Captain Reese Cullen appears during a break in his unit's training exercises. He carries the physical bearing of someone accustomed to command, shoulders weighted by responsibility that goes beyond his own survival. When he spots Iris on the bench, the transformation is immediate and complete. The officer dissolves into the husband. His face softens in a way that suggests this woman represents everything he fights to protect and everything he risks losing. They embrace with the intensity of people who have learned not to waste moments. When he pulls back to study her face, genuine concern shadows his expression. "She looks tired," he tells her. "The drive was long," she responds, "but worth every mile." They walk together toward the recreation building, his hand finding hers with familiar ease. He talks about the deployment in the careful way of someone trained not to discuss classified details. Logistics, timeline, reassurances that are meant to comfort even when they cannot promise safety. She asks the questions a concerned spouse would ask, plays the role with perfect authenticity, because perhaps it is not entirely a role. When she mentions wishing he didn't have to go to the remote forward operating bases, the worry in her voice sounds genuine. He squeezes her hand and repeats the words that have ended countless similar conversations. It's the job. He'll be back before she knows it. Inside the recreation building, they find relative privacy among other families conducting their own difficult goodbyes. They sit together near a window that overlooks the western perimeter. Reese continues talking about things that matter and things that don't, filling the space between them with words because silence would make the approaching separation too real. Iris listens and responds and maintains the performance flawlessly, until her gaze drifts to the window. Her attention snags on the ridgeline beyond the perimeter fence, rocky, elevated, unmonitored by any visible security presence. She studies it with an intensity that breaks character for just a moment. Reese notices the shift, asks what caught her attention. She blinks and refocuses, manufacturing a smile that almost reaches her eyes. "Nothing," she tells him, "just admiring how beautiful the landscape is out here." He follows her gaze but sees only terrain, rocks and distance and the endless sky, nothing worth the focused attention she gave it. The moment passes. They return to their goodbye conversation, but the camera lingers on that ridgeline, empty, quiet, waiting. 14:30 hours arrives with the mechanical inevitability of military schedules. Reese must return to his unit. Final preparations before deployment wait for no one. He walks Iris back toward the visitor center, stealing a few more minutes before duty reclaims him completely. At the entrance, they hold each other one more time. He tells her he loves her. She says it back. Then he's gone, jogging toward his assembly point with the easy athleticism of someone half his age. Corporal Lockett escorts Iris to a waiting area inside the visitor center. Plastic chairs, vending machines, a television playing news no one watches. She sits with her duffel at her feet, hands folded in her lap again. 3 other visitors occupy the space, a contractor reviewing paperwork, 2 family members making quiet conversation, all of them waiting for 1,800 hours and the end of visitation privileges. The first mortar hits the eastern perimeter at 14:32. The explosion tears through the afternoon, calm with violence that makes the building shake. Alarms scream to life across the compound. The sounds of organized routine shatter into chaos. Boots pounding, officers shouting, equipment moving. The television cuts to static as the communications tower takes a direct hit. Iris doesn't flinch. While the other visitors cry out and scramble away from the windows, she stands and moves toward the glass. Her eyes track the attack pattern with clinical precision, where the mortars land, which defensive positions are being suppressed, the systematic nature of the assault. Corporal Lockett bursts through the door, rifle in hand and fear in his eyes. All civilians to the bunker, now. The order comes out harsh because fear makes people harsh. The contractor and family members bolt for the exit immediately, following Lockett's gestures toward the underground shelter. Iris remains at the window. Another explosion. Smoke rising. Radio chatter fragmenting into desperate confusion. Lockett grabs her arm and physically pulls her toward the bunker because standing there makes her a liability he cannot afford. She allows herself to be moved, but her eyes never stop working, never stop analyzing what everyone else experiences as chaos. The bunker is concrete and cramped and designed for survival rather than comfort. The other, civilians huddle together in the center, drawing comfort from proximity. Iris sits apart near the ventilation grate. Through it, muffled sounds of battle filter down. Explosions, gunfire, fragmented radio transmissions that paint a picture of coordinated assault, taking fire from the northwest ridge. Mortar teams have them zeroed, can't advance. Sniper active. Already lost 2 squad leaders. Iris closes her eyes and listens. The mortars aren't random. They walk a precise grid pattern, suppressing defensive positions and isolating squads, creating kill zones. Beneath the explosive percussion, single rifle shots punctuate the chaos. Methodical, professional, each one followed by panicked voices. Her breathing changes, slower, deeper. The physiological response of someone preparing for action rather than sheltering from danger. Lockett's handheld radio crackles with fragmenting command structure, all available personnel to defensive positions. Protocol Alpha 3 in effect. His face goes pale because Alpha 3 means the situation is degrading faster than leadership can contain. He looks at the civilians, makes a decision, and runs back up the stairs to join the defense. The moment his footsteps fade, Iris moves. She pulls the duffel close and unzips it with hands that know exactly what they're reaching for. Inside, no clothes, no toiletries, no ordinary contents of an overnight bag. Instead, a compact rifle case, disassembled, professional grade, the kind of equipment that raises questions about who carries it and why. The contractor stares with widening eyes, asks what that is with a voice that climbs toward panic. Iris doesn't answer because the radio transmission through the grate steals all her attention. Captain Cullen's squad is pinned, northeast sector, can't extract, casualties mounting. Her husband, cut off, exposed, dying. She stands, slings the duffel over her shoulder with movements that belong to someone who has done this before, done it enough, that the weight distribution is automatic. The contractor stammers that they were ordered to stay, that leaving the bunker violates direct commands. Iris looks at her with eyes that have gone cold and absolutely calm. They will stay, she says. The distinction is crystal clear. Then she climbs the stairs into smoke and screaming and the systematic destruction of everything the base tried to be. If you've ever known someone who was more than they appeared, someone whose quiet strength only revealed itself when everything fell apart, share that story in the comments. And if you want to see how this ends, hit subscribe, because what happens next will change everything. The world above ground has transformed into something from a nightmare. Smoke rolls across the compound in thick waves that smell of burning fuel and scorched metal. Soldiers sprint between cover points with the desperate efficiency of people who understand that hesitation means death. Radio communications fragment into overlapping voices, all trying to coordinate a defense that keeps collapsing faster than leadership can rebuild it. Iris emerges from the bunker into this chaos and becomes invisible within it. She moves through the pandemonium like water finding paths through stone. Her gait matches the urgency around her without drawing attention. When soldiers rush past, she angles her body to let them through. When officers shout commands, she adjusts her trajectory to avoid their sightlines. The duffel bag over her shoulder could contain emergency supplies. Her civilian clothes could belong to any of a dozen support personnel. Nothing about her triggers the pattern recognition that would make someone stop and question why she isn't sheltering. The southern guard tower rises 30 feet above the compound perimeter. It was positioned to monitor the main access road, but the attack came from entirely different vectors, leaving this position abandoned as personnel rushed to reinforce the collapsing northern and eastern lines. Iris reaches the base of the tower, while another mortar strike sends defenders scrambling for cover. She climbs the metal ladder with movements that suggest this is not the first tower she has scaled under fire. At the top, the entire battlefield reveals itself. The northwest ridge where enemy snipers have established overwatch. The eastern slope where mortar teams operate with impunity. The northeast sector where Reese and his squad are pinned behind insufficient cover. She kneels and opens the duffel with hands that have performed this sequence so many times, the conscious mind no longer needs to supervise. The rifle assembles itself through muscle memory alone. Bolt slides home. Scope mounts with precise clicks. Magazine seats with a sound that means readiness. She settles into the shooting position with her body forming angles that physics demands for accuracy at extreme range. Her breathing slows until each exhale becomes a deliberate event rather than automatic function. Through the scope, the northwest ridge resolves into sharp detail, rocks, shadows, the barely visible muzzle flash of an enemy sniper who has been systematically eliminating anyone trying to coordinate the base defense. 1,200 meters. Wind gusting from the west at approximately 8 miles per hour. Temperature affecting bullet trajectory. Elevation difference requiring compensation. Her mind processes variables that most people couldn't identify, let alone calculate. Her finger finds the trigger with the familiarity of greeting an old companion. She exhales, and the rifle speaks. On the northwest ridge, the enemy sniper's head snaps backward with the sudden violence of physics asserting itself. He collapses behind the rocks that provided his concealment. For a moment, the entire battlefield seems to pause as if the world itself needs time to process what just happened. Then chaos resumes, but the character of it has changed. Confusion ripples through enemy positions. Uncertainty about what just eliminated their overwatch. Near the command post, a spotter screams into his radio that the hostile sniper is down, neutralized, eliminated. Lieutenant Maeve Torin grabs the transmission and demands identification. Who made that shot? Which position? Report immediately. The radio returns only static, because the shooter isn't on any roster, isn't part of any defensive plan, doesn't exist in the official order of battle. Iris has already moved on. The scope finds a mortar team on the eastern ridge operating behind rock formations they believe provide adequate protection. 900 meters, different angle, different wind conditions. She adjusts and fires. The mortar operator drops, and the team scatters like insects exposed to sudden light. Another radio transmission cuts through the chaos. Second hostile down. Eastern position. Who is shooting? The question goes unanswered because the answer doesn't fit any framework command can process. Torin orders all designated snipers to report their positions. The responses come back in confused fragments. Daniels in the south tower didn't take those shots. Kovar on the west position doesn't have the angle. The voice on the radio carries an edge of something between awe and fear. Ma'am, whoever is shooting isn't on the roster, isn't supposed to exist. Private Ellis Gray is pinned behind a concrete barrier near the motor pool when he hears the next shot originate from somewhere above and behind him. The angle is wrong for any of the known defensive positions. He risks lifting his head and looks up toward the abandoned southern tower. What he sees makes his training and his understanding of the situation collide with reality in ways that produce only incomprehension. The woman from the visitor center, the one Corporal Lockett escorted to safety, kneeling in a shooting position that belongs in training manuals, firing a rifle that shouldn't be in civilian hands, each shot deliberate and impossibly precise. He grabs his radio with hands that shake from adrenaline and disbelief, keys the transmission, tries to find words for what he's witnessing. Lieutenant, you won't believe this? You need to see this. The words feel inadequate for the reality unfolding above him. One by one, enemy positions collapse. A machine gun nest that had been shredding the northern perimeter goes silent when its operator takes a round through the narrow gap in his cover. Spotters directing mortar fire disappear in sequence as if an invisible hand is methodically erasing them from the battlefield. Each shot comes from a different angle because Iris understands that pattern recognition works both ways. If the enemy figures out where she is, the tower becomes a death trap. The momentum shifts in ways that cascade through military engagements. Squads that were pinned down find themselves able to move. Medevac routes that were under fire suddenly clear. Officers who were shouting defensive commands start coordinating counterattacks. The radio traffic transforms from panic to something approaching controlled aggression. Captain Cullen's squad is moving. They're extracting. They're clear. Lieutenant Torin receives that transmission and allows herself one moment of relief before the larger mystery crashes back into her awareness. She grabs her binoculars and scans the compound for the source of the impossible shooting. The scope finds the southern tower, finds the figure kneeling there. Recognition hits with the force of revelation. The visitor, the one they tried to protect, the one who should be cowering in a bunker, is instead dictating the outcome of the entire engagement. Torin's face cycles through expressions that have no names: shock, understanding, a kind of professional respect that transcends rank or circumstance. She keys her radio and tries to form a question that makes sense. Who is that? The words feel absurd even as she speaks them, because she already knows the answer won't fit any category her training prepared her for. By the time Torin reaches the southern tower, the attack is fragmenting. Enemy forces are pulling back from positions they can no longer hold. Reinforcements from a neighboring base are inbound. The siege is breaking not through superior firepower or tactical brilliance, but because one person with one rifle changed the mathematics of the entire battle. Torin climbs the tower with her sidearm ready, not because she expects hostility, but because protocol demands readiness when approaching unknown elements. Iris is disassembling the rifle with the same practiced efficiency she used to build it. Each component returns to its designated space in the duffel. The movements are automatic, meditative, the ritual of completion that marks the end of mission parameters. She doesn't look up when Torin's boots reach the tower platform, doesn't acknowledge the presence of authority, just continues the process that will return her to civilian invisibility. Torin stops in the doorway, weapon lowered but present, voice carrying the weight of someone trying to reconcile irreconcilable facts. Who are you? The question emerges flat, because inflection would suggest she expects a normal answer, and nothing about this situation is normal. Iris finally looks up from the duffel. Her expression shows exhaustion, but not shame, not defiance, just the bone-deep tiredness of someone who has done difficult work and survived the doing. Iris Cullen, she says, visitor badge 4421. The response is technically accurate and completely insufficient. That's not what I mean, Torin says. The words come out harder than intended because fear and adrenaline have nowhere else to go. Iris zips the duffel closed with deliberate care. I know what you mean, Lieutenant. The acknowledgement carries no elaboration, no explanation, just recognition that the question exists and cannot be answered in ways that satisfy institutional requirements. Torin studies the rifle case, the precision of the shooting, the impossible geometry of what just occurred. You saved this base. The statement is not gratitude, it's assessment, confirmation of observable facts. Iris stands and shoulders the duffel. You would have held. The response is generous and completely dishonest. They both know the truth. They both understand what would have happened without intervention that came from outside all official channels. We both know that's not true, Torin says. The admission costs something. An acknowledgement that the system failed and survival came from sources the system doesn't recognize or control. Silence fills the space between them. Wind carries smoke across the compound. Below, soldiers are securing the perimeter and treating casualties. The organized chaos of aftermath, replacing the disorganized chaos of combat. Torin's hand rests on her sidearm, not as threat, but as anchor, physical reminder of her role and responsibilities within a framework that this woman just operated completely outside. What unit? Torin asks. The question is quieter now, professional curiosity mixing with something that might be respect. Iris meets her eyes with a directness that suggests she has nothing to hide and everything to conceal. That's not something I can discuss. The words are final, not hostile, just bounded by rules that exist beyond this conversation. Can't or won't, Torin presses. Both, Iris says. The radio on Torin's vest crackles. Lieutenant Torin, command needs you at the CP immediately. The transmission breaks the moment, reintroduces the institutional framework that demands her attention. She doesn't move, doesn't break eye contact. The decision forms in the space between protocol and pragmatism. She steps aside. Go, she says, before anyone else sees you. The words constitute permission and conspiracy. An officer choosing to let something pass that regulations would demand she contain. Iris nods once. The gesture acknowledges the gift being given. She descends the ladder without looking back. Torin watches her disappear into the compound, becoming just another civilian moving through aftermath, invisible again. The radio calls for her attention a second time, and she finally responds, but her eyes stay on the woman with the duffel bag until she's completely out of sight. Sometimes the people who change everything are the ones who were never supposed to be there at all. If that makes you think of someone you know, someone whose quiet capability saved the day when no one expected it, leave a comment, and subscribe if you want to see how this story ends. because the truth about who Iris really is goes deeper than anyone imagined. The base settles into the strange calm that follows violence. Smoke still rises from impact craters, but the explosions have stopped. Medics move between casualties with practiced efficiency. Damage assessment teams photograph destroyed equipment. The organized aftermath replaces the chaos of combat, but the underlying tension remains because everyone knows how close they came to complete collapse. How many lives hang by threads that almost severed? Captain Reese Cullen searches through the compound with the frantic energy of someone who has survived battle, only to remember what survival might have cost. He finds Iris exactly where she's supposed to be, back at the visitor center, sitting in the same plastic chair with the duffel at her feet, as if nothing happened, as if the world didn't nearly end while she sheltered underground. He crosses the distance in 3 strides and pulls her into his arms with force that speaks to how afraid he was. She lets herself be held, returns the embrace with appropriate intensity. When he pulls back to study her face, searching for signs of trauma or shock, she manufactures the expression he needs to see. Shaken but safe, grateful but fragile. "Thank God you're safe," he says. The words tumble out, with relief that makes them almost incoherent. They got you to the bunker in time. Statement framed as question, seeking confirmation that the protocols worked, that the system protected what it was designed to protect. She nods against his chest. "I'm fine." The lie is perfect because it contains just enough truth to be believable. She is physically unharmed. She did spend time in the bunker. Everything else is omission rather than fabrication. He holds her tighter, and she can feel his heartbeat gradually slowing from combat tempo to something approaching normal. He doesn't see Lieutenant Torin watching from across the compound, doesn't notice the weight of that gaze or the questions it carries, doesn't understand that the woman in his arms just rewrote the outcome of an engagement that should have killed him. Across the motor pool, Private Ellis Gray approaches Torin with the hesitant body language of someone about to speak truth to power. "Ma'am," he starts, "about that woman," his eyes track to Iris. "Should we report it?" The question carries implications that branch in multiple directions. Official channels, after-action reports, investigation into how a civilian accessed military weapons and intervened in active combat. Torin is quiet for a long moment. She watches Reese hold his wife, watches a soldier find comfort in the belief that the system kept her safe, watches ignorance provide peace that knowledge would destroy. "Report what, Private?" Her voice is flat, neutral, giving nothing away. Gray hesitates because the answer seems obvious, but the tone suggests he's missing something. "But he starts. The words trail off because completing them means accusing his lieutenant of willful blindness. "We held this position because of good training and disciplined soldiers," Torin says. Each word carries the weight of decision. That's the official record. She turns to face Gray directly. Eye contact that demands understanding without requiring acknowledgement. "Understood." Gray looks at Iris one more time. At the duffel bag. At the woman who shouldn't have changed anything, but changed everything. His jaw works as he processes the order that isn't quite an order. The instruction to see what everyone else will see and nothing more. "Understood, ma'am." The response carries resignation and perhaps relief. Some truths are too complicated for official reports. Reese walks Iris toward the main gate as 1800 hours approaches, final moments before visitation ends and deployment begins. They move slowly, stealing time that regulations will soon reclaim. At her sedan, he holds her close one more time, the embrace of people who have learned that goodbyes might be permanent. "I love you," he says. "Be safe." "You too," she responds. The words mean different things to each of them, but the sentiment aligns. He kisses her forehead with tenderness that suggests she represents everything fragile in a world of violence, has no idea he's kissing someone who just eliminated 14 hostiles from 1,200 meters, no conception that her capability dwarfs his in ways he will never know. She drives away, and he watches until the sedan disappears around the first bend. Then duty reclaims him, and he jogs back toward his unit. Final preparations wait for no one. In her rearview mirror, Iris watches the base shrink, watches the scene of chaos return to military order, watches the place where she saved lives without anyone knowing she was there. Her phone buzzes. Text from an unlisted number. Overwatch complete. Next assignment, TBD. Well done, Wraith. She reads it once while stopped at a traffic signal, commits the content to memory, deletes it with a gesture that has become automatic. The phone shows no record of the message, no evidence it ever existed. She keeps driving toward a life that will resume as if nothing happened, toward routines that require her to be someone other than what she is. The road unspools ahead and behind. Ordinary. Unremarkable. Carrying traffic that has no idea what just passed among them. Back at the base, Lieutenant Torrance sits alone in the command post, writing her after-action report. The document will be read by people who weren't there, people who will analyze decisions and outcomes through frameworks that assume complete information. She pauses at the section detailing how the siege was broken, how casualties were minimized, how disaster transformed into survival. Her fingers hover over the keyboard. She types what happened in language stripped of context. Unidentified sniper support from elevated southern position. Shooter demonstrated expert-level marksmanship under combat conditions. Identity unknown. The words are factually accurate and completely insufficient. They describe events without explaining them. Chronicle outcomes without acknowledging the questions those outcomes raise. She adds one more line. Recommend no further investigation. The statement constitutes professional, judgment, and personal decision. Recognition that some operational realities exist outside official channels. That effectiveness sometimes requires ignorance about how effectiveness was achieved. Then she deletes that last sentence, replaces it with something simpler, something that acknowledges truth without demanding explanation. Some warriors don't need names. She saves the document and closes the file. The record is complete, incomplete, both simultaneously. Weeks pass, the deployment proceeds. Captain Cullen leads his unit through missions that test every aspect of their training. The attack on Forward Operating Base Sentinel becomes a case study in defensive coordination. How a base under siege maintained cohesion. How leadership adapted to communication failures. How training proved its value under impossible conditions. The reports circulate through military education channels. Students analyze decisions. Instructors highlight lessons learned. Nobody mentions the visitor with the duffel bag. In a classified facility that exists on no public maps, a senior officer reviews incident reports from theaters worldwide. He opens a file marked with a code name that appears in no directory. Wraith. Operational history. The document contains mission logs stripped of identifying details, confirmed eliminations, locations stabilized, outcomes achieved through intervention that left no official fingerprint. He adds a new entry. Forward Operating Base. Sentinel. January. 14 hostile eliminations. 0 friendly casualties during crisis. Asset performed as expected. Cover maintained. The language is clinical, professional. Reduces human action to operational metrics. He closes the file and returns it to a drawer marked Tier 0, eyes only. The designation means fewer than 20 people in the entire military structure know this category exists. Iris Cullen returns home to a life that looks exactly like it did before. She waters plants, prepares meals, goes to work at a job that requires none of the skills that define her. Neighbors wave, colleagues make small talk. Everyone sees a military spouse managing the anxiety of deployment. Nobody sees the operator maintaining cover until the next assignment activates her again. One evening, she stands at her kitchen window washing dishes. Ordinary domestic task. Her eyes track movement in the street beyond, a jogger, a dog walker, a car turning into a driveway. Her gaze measures distances instinctively, calculates angles, assesses sight lines. The skill set never turns off, never stops running tactical assessments beneath the surface of civilian normalcy. In a drawer near the front door, her visitor badge from Forward Operating Base. Sentinel rests beneath a wedding photo. Both items represent truth. Both conceal as much as they reveal. The badge identifies her as someone's wife. The photo captures a moment of genuine happiness. Neither mentions the rifle, neither acknowledges the 14 people who died, because she was there. Neither records the lives saved because she intervened. The official report says the base held because of good training, because soldiers did their jobs under impossible conditions, because leadership made correct decisions when communication failed. All of this is true. All of this is incomplete. The base held because someone who wasn't supposed to be there changed the mathematics of survival, because a ghost operated in spaces official structures can't acknowledge. Because sometimes the difference between disaster and survival comes from sources that can never be thanked. Lieutenant Torin receives her promotion 6 weeks after the attack. The citation mentions crisis management, adaptive leadership, maintaining defensive cohesion under coordinated assault. She accepts the advancement with appropriate humility, never mentions that success came from decisions that violated protocol, never acknowledges that victory sometimes requires looking away from truth, that regulations would demand she confront. Private Gray serves out his deployment and returns home with stories he tells and stories he doesn't. When people ask about the siege, he describes the chaos, the fear, the moment when everything could have collapsed. He never mentions the woman in the tower, never speaks about shots that came from positions that weren't manned. Some truths exist better as silence than explanation. Captain Cullen completes his deployment and returns to find Iris exactly as he left her, waiting, supportive, the foundation that makes his service possible. He tells her about missions, about challenges overcome, about moments when training proved its worth. She listens with the attention of someone who understands more than he knows, who carries secrets that protect him by remaining unspoken. The world continues turning. Threats emerge and get addressed, some publicly, some through channels that appear in no record. Operators move through civilian spaces carrying capabilities that would terrify the people around them if those capabilities became visible. They save lives, prevent disasters, alter outcomes, then disappear back into ordinary existence because that's the job, that's the requirement, that's the price of operating in shadows that keep the light safe. Somewhere in a classified database, the codename Wraith waits for activation, for the next crisis that requires intervention from sources that don't officially exist, for the moment when someone who appears to be nothing becomes everything that stands between survival and collapse. The file contains no photograph, no identifying information, just a record of outcomes achieved and a notation that reads like epitaph and mission statement combined. The base stands because she was there. Have you ever known someone whose quiet strength saved everything but never asked for recognition? Someone who carried weight invisibly while everyone else took credit for standing? Share their story below. They deserve to be remembered even if they can never be named. And if this story moved you, if it made you think about the unseen people who hold the world together, subscribe, because their silence doesn't make them less real. It just makes them harder to see.